This short video has been put together to help you in thinking about how to support your child's emotional well-being in the build-up to the return to school and beyond. It's absolutely normal and understandable for both you and your child to be feeling apprehensive at this time. I've put together top 5 tips based on psychological research to help you to support your child with any anxiety they may be feeling at the moment. The first thing to do is to talk to your child about their feelings. This can be particularly difficult for young children who may not have the emotional vocabulary to accurately explain how they're feeling, but also for older children who do have the emotional literacy skills but may be less willing to talk to you about their feelings. So there are some tools that you can use. The first thing is something called wondering aloud. When we ask people directly how they're feeling, it's tempting for people to just use a default response of "I'm fine" or "I'm okay," without really giving them a chance to express how they're feeling. Wondering loud is where you'd say something like, "I'm just wondering if you might be feeling a bit anxious about going back to school after being at home for so long." In using a phrase like that, it's very open, it opens up the conversation, and it can feel a lot less confrontational. The other thing that this does is it labels the feelings. And as soon as we label feelings, we know that that reduces the intensity of that feeling. However, for very young children, they may not associate the word anxiety with how they feel because it's not part of their vocabulary. So it's important to explore the words that they would use to describe that feeling, using questions like, "What would you call the feeling that you have when we talk about going back to school?" You could also encourage them to draw the feelings to allow you to explore whether that feeling is likely to be anxiety by asking them to fill in on a body outline where they feel the feelings that they have in their body when you talk about going back to school. The next thing to do is to empathise, validate, and problem solve with your child. So it can be very tempting to just reassure and distract your child away from their negative feelings, but it's really important to empathise with them about the feelings that they have, validate them because they're totally understandable given the situation, and problem solve about what you can do and what they can do and perhaps what school can do to make them feel a bit better. And lastly, identify any negative thoughts that they have and test out with evidence. So it's understandable again that they would have negative thoughts about going back to school given the situation. But see if you can identify whether there are any particularly negative, maybe irrational or catastrophic thoughts that they're having. And then try to test these out. So rather than just saying to them, "Oh, don't worry," or "That won't happen," then give them questions such as, "What's the evidence for that thought? What's the evidence against that thought? So what might be a more balanced thought? And what would you say to a friend if they were having that thought?" And all of those things are really important because we know that there's a big link between thoughts, how we feel, and how we behave. So if we can challenge that thought, it can really help that child to feel better. Tip number 2 is to start getting back into routine. The aim of this is to make everything as controllable and predictable as possible, because research shows us that change is stressful for all of us, but the more control we feel over the situation and the more predictable it is, the more able we are to tolerate that stress. Think about adjusting bedtimes and wake-up times if these have drifted slightly during lockdown, and start to try to get back into the morning routine in advance. A visual like the one shown on the right-hand side of the screen might be helpful in starting to make that adjustment. Consider practicing the route to school if transport has changed, particularly if your child may be used to get the train or the bus and won't be doing that because of social distancing. If you can start to practice it, it'll make that more predictable. Check uniform and school shoes still fit, because obviously that's one less thing you don't want to be stressing about during the first day back. And finally, have a visual calendar to count down to the return to school. This can be helpful for all children, but particularly those who find transition and changes difficult. Number 3 is all about coping with reluctance to return to school. So we know that some children may experience separation anxiety following such a long time away from school and being with their parents. And for the older children, there may be some reluctance to attend school as well. This may be particularly for the children who've experienced separation anxiety and emotional-based school avoidance before, but equally it could be for children who have perhaps had a difficult time during lockdown, maybe they've experienced a bereavement in the family, or it could be for children who experience school as being quite an anxiety-provoking environment and have had a wonderful time being at home and away from school, and therefore the home environment's become quite reinforced and going back to school will be more difficult for them. And we know from research that it's the longer you are at home for and out of school, the more difficult it can be to go back. So we really need to be prepared for this and to have some tools in our toolkit to help them to get back. Transition objects can be really helpful for young children. So what I mean by a transition object is something that belongs to you, a non-valuable small object that they can take to school with them to look after for you, that can help them to feel connected to you. If you don't want to give them something, or you feel it might be quite risky for them to take something and lose, you could just try drawing a little heart on your hand and a little heart on their hand to help them to feel connected to you. Another thing that some people do is write little notes for their children on their banana in their lunchbox, or just a post-it in their lunchbox. And there are books to help you with this as well. So for young children, a book called The Invisible String can be really helpful to start reading in the build-up to going back to school, to help them to know that they're still connected to you. Second thing is to reconnect with peers. So going back to school to see their peers can be quite a big motivator. So we're looking for things that's going to motivate children to want to go back to school amidst all the things that they may feel are risk factors for them going back to school. Gradually reintroduce the idea of school in a hopeful and positive way, thinking about all the good things about school, and being quite gradual. It may be that you want to go and take them for a drive past school, or it may be that in just trying on the school uniform and putting that back on is part of that gradual reintroduction to the idea of school. Again, as I said in the first slide, problem solve with them about what's going to make it easier for them, and communicate your concerns with school staff so that they can work with you to help your child to get back into school. Number 4 is to check in on your own emotions. It's understandable to feel very anxious about the return to school, but children take their emotional cues from us, so try to remain calm and positive, as this will have a really good impact on their emotional well-being. So prioritise looking after yourself, using self-care strategies, doing things that make you feel happy and you feel calm, so that in turn you can help them to feel calm and contained. Use and model calming strategies. A really good one to do with children is a breathing technique to help to balance the nervous system. So things like 7-11 breathing, where you breathe in for 7 seconds and then breathe out through your mouth for 11 seconds. If you do that a number of times, it should help you to feel nice and calm, and is a nice easy one for them to do when they don't feel very calm. And secondly, using mindfulness is great at the moment, particularly as it encourages us to think about the now and focus on the now rather than focusing on the future and all of the what ifs and the uncertainty. One nice mindfulness technique that you can try with your child either in your house or in your garden is something called grounding the senses. So what you have to do is you have to look for 5 things that you can see, then 4 things that you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things that you can smell or taste, and then take 1 nice deep breath. And finally, number 5 is to make use of further support if needed. During the pandemic, there have been a number of wonderful resources and activities that have been produced to help you to support children and young people. The first one I want to mention is this social story about the return to school, which can be particularly helpful for children who struggle with their social understanding and children who are on the autistic spectrum. The second resource that I want to mention are the anxiety resources that are available from the Anna Freud Centre. The link is there. There's also a worry book for young children. And then finally, some coronavirus family discussion cards that can help you to bring up the conversation about positives and negatives at the dinner table, and also some nice activities for you to do. I hope that this has been helpful, and thank you for listening.